The Wyoming wind didn't ask permission. It tore across the valley like it owned the place, whipping dust into Mara's eyes as she climbed down from the wagon. Her legs shook, not from the cold, but from the weight of what she'd done. Behind her, the driver was already turning the horses around. "Wait," she started, but he cut her off with a look that said he'd been paid to deliver her, not to care what happened next. The wagon pulled away, wheels crunching over frozen ground, and Mara was alone. Well, not alone. 50 yards ahead stood a ranch house that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and stubbornness. Beyond it, corrals stretched into the distance, filled with horses that moved like liquid muscle under the gray sky. And walking toward her, boots heavy on the packed earth, was the man who'd paid $300 for a wife he'd never met. Caleb Rourke. She'd seen his photograph. It hadn't prepared her. He was tall, taller than the image suggested, with shoulders that came from years of work, not vanity. His face was weathered, hard-planed, the kind of face that didn't waste energy on expressions it didn't need. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a mouth set in a line that looked permanent. He stopped 10 feet away and stared at her. Mara felt the inspection like a physical thing. She wasn't beautiful, she knew that. Her sister Lily had gotten the golden hair, the perfect features, the kind of face that made men stupid. Mara had gotten everything else. Brown hair that wouldn't hold a curl, a nose that was a fraction too wide, a build that was sturdy instead of delicate. Useful, her father had said once. Like a good plow horse. Caleb's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Confusion, maybe? Or disappointment. "You're not Lily Whitlock," he said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "No." Mara's throat was dry. "I'm Mara, her sister." A long silence stretched between them. Somewhere in the corrals, a horse whinnied. "Where is she?" Caleb asked. Mara's hands tightened on the handle of her small traveling case. She couldn't come." "Couldn't?" He said it flat, turning the word into something sharp. "Or wouldn't. Does it matter?" His jaw tightened. "I paid for a bride. I got a bait and switch." The bluntness of it stung, even though she'd been expecting it. Mara lifted her chin. "My father made the arrangement. Lily was supposed to come. But there was someone else. A banker's son in Philadelphia. She ran off with him 2 days before the wedding." "And your father sent you instead?" It wasn't a question. "Yes." Caleb looked away, his gaze sweeping over the ranch, the mountains in the distance, the darkening sky. When he looked back, his expression was carved from stone. "I didn't pay $300 for a replacement," he said. "I paid for the woman in the photograph, the one your father promised me." "I know. So what exactly am I supposed to do with you?" The question hung in the cold air between them. Mara had asked herself the same thing for 2 weeks, sitting on trains and wagons, traveling across a country that got harder and emptier the farther west she went. She'd had plenty of time to think about what would happen when she arrived. None of her scenarios had been good. "I can work," she said. The words came out steadier than she felt. "I can cook, clean, handle livestock. I'm stronger than I look." "That's not what I paid for." "I know what you paid for, but she's not here and I am." Mara met his eyes, forcing herself not to look away. "I didn't ask for this. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere else. So you can either send me back, assuming you've got money for the fare, which I'm guessing you don't, or you can put me to work." Something shifted in his face. Not softening exactly. More like reassessment. "You always this mouthy?" he asked. "Only when I'm scared." The honesty seemed to surprise him. He studied her for another long moment, then turned and started walking toward the house. "Come on," he said over his shoulder. "You'll freeze out here." Mara grabbed her case and followed. The ranch house was exactly what she'd expected. Functional, sparse, built for survival rather than comfort. One main room with a fireplace, a kitchen area that consisted of a cast iron stove and a rough wooden counter, a table with mismatched chairs. 2 doors led to what she assumed were bedrooms. Everything was clean but worn, used hard and cared for out of necessity rather than affection. Caleb dropped his hat on a peg by the door and stood with his back to the fire, arms crossed. "I've got 2 ranch hands," he said. "They live in the bunkhouse out back. We run horses, buying wild stock, breaking them. selling them to the army and freight companies. It's hard work, long days, and the profit margin's thin. I brought in a wife because I needed help running the household, and because I'm 34 years old and tired of eating my own cooking. I didn't bring in a wife because I wanted romance or companionship. I wanted a partner, someone competent. I'm competent, Mara said. You're a substitute. That doesn't make me incompetent. He didn't argue with that. Instead, he moved to the kitchen area and poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that looked like it had been sitting on the stove since morning. He handed her one. You'll sleep in the spare room, he said. You'll handle the cooking, cleaning, laundry. I'll expect breakfast before dawn, dinner at sundown. The hands get fed too. In exchange, you get a roof, food, and clothes if you need them. That's it? Mara asked. No wage? You got passage out here. That's worth something. Passage I didn't ask for. And a marriage contract you didn't fulfill. His tone was flat. I figure that makes us even. Mara sipped the coffee. It was bitter and strong, and it burned all the way down. What about the marriage part? What about it? You paid for a wife. I'm here instead. It means nothing, Caleb interrupted. You're not the woman I contracted for. As far as I'm concerned, there's no marriage. You're hired help, that's all. Relief and something else, something she didn't want to examine too closely, washed through her. Fine. Fine, he echoed. They stood in the kitchen, drinking bad coffee, while the wind rattled the windows and the fire crackled behind them. Mara could feel exhaustion pulling at her bones. She'd been traveling for weeks, sleeping in train cars and boarding houses, eating whatever she could afford. The warmth of the house was making her dizzy. The room's through there, Caleb said, nodding toward one of the doors. I'll wake you before dawn. I'll be up. He looked at her like he doubted it, but didn't argue. We'll see. Mara finished her coffee and walked to the spare room. It was small, just a bed, a chair, and a trunk. But it was clean, and the mattress looked halfway decent. She set her case down and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking now that she was alone. She'd done it. She was here. And she had absolutely no idea what came next. Dawn came early and brutal. Mara woke to the sound of boots in the main room and scrambled out of bed, her body protesting every movement. She'd barely slept, her mind churning through everything that had happened, everything that could still go wrong. She dressed quickly in the dim light, the same travel-worn dress she'd arrived in, and stepped into the main room. Caleb was already at the stove building up the fire. You're late, he said without looking at her. It's still dark. That's late. He straightened and moved toward the door. Breakfast in 30 minutes. The hands will be here. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a solid thunk. Mara stood in the kitchen, looking at the stove, the supplies stacked on rough shelves, the lack of anything resembling organization. She told him she could cook. That wasn't entirely a lie. She could manage basic meals, the kind of thing you learned growing up in a house where servants were a luxury you couldn't afford. But cooking for ranch hands? For men who worked hard and expected fuel, not fancy? She'd figure it out. She found flour, salt, bacon, and eggs. Coffee was already made. Caleb's doing, probably. She built up the fire, got a pan heating, and started with what she knew, bacon and eggs, biscuits that were more functional than beautiful. By the time she heard boots on the porch, she had plates ready. Caleb came in first, followed by 2 men who looked like they'd been carved from the same hard landscape. The first was older, maybe 50, with gray shot through his beard and eyes that had seen everything twice. The second was younger, lean and watchful, with the kind of face that didn't give anything away. They stopped when they saw her. This is Mara, Caleb said, hanging his hat on the peg. She'll be handling the house. The older man looked at her, then at Caleb. What happened to the other one? Didn't work out, Caleb said. This is what we've got. Huh. The man moved to the table and sat down. I'm Dutch. That's Carter. He nodded toward the younger man. We don't talk much before coffee. Mara brought plates to the table and poured coffee. The men ate without comment, which she took as either approval or indifference. Caleb ate quickly, his attention already somewhere else. We're working the northern pasture today, he said to Dutch, bringing in the last of the wild stock before the weather turns. That roan's going to be trouble, Dutch said around a mouthful of biscuit. All of them are trouble. That's why we get paid. Carter, who hadn't said a word, looked at Mara. You know how to ride? No, she said. He nodded like that confirmed something and went back to his eggs. Breakfast was over in 15 minutes. The men filed out, leaving Mara alone with a table full of dirty plates and a kitchen that needed cleaning. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The days that followed developed a rhythm that felt less like living and more like controlled drowning. Mara woke before dawn, built the fire, made breakfast. The men ate and left. She cleaned, hauled water from the well, scrubbed floors that seemed to generate new dirt the moment she finished. Laundry was a full-day project involving boiling water, harsh soap, and a washboard that destroyed her hands. Cooking dinner meant figuring out how to make tough cuts of meat edible, how to stretch supplies, how to feed 4 people on a budget that assumed nothing wasted. She learned quickly that the ranch operated on a principle of brutal efficiency. Nothing was soft, nothing was easy, and nothing was forgiven. The third day, she burned the biscuits. Caleb looked at the blackened lumps on his plate and said, "Try again tomorrow." The fifth day, she dropped a plate and it shattered. Dutch swept it up without comment and handed her the broom. The eighth day, she was hauling water from the well when the rope slipped and the bucket fell, splashing icy water all over her dress. Carter, walking past, said, "You'll want to tie that knot tighter." That was it. No sympathy, no help, just facts. And somehow that was worse than anger would have been, because anger meant you mattered enough to provoke a reaction. Indifference meant you were just another broken thing that needed fixing. But Mara had spent her whole life being the broken thing, the substitute, the daughter who wasn't quite right. She knew how to take it. More than that, she knew how to use it. If they expected her to fail, she'd prove them wrong. If they expected her to quit, she'd outlast them. If they expected her to break, well, she'd been breaking for years. She knew how to keep moving anyway. 2 weeks in, Dutch walked into the kitchen while she was kneading bread and said, "You tie that knot better now." It was the first compliment she'd received. 3 weeks in, Carter left his plate at the sink instead of on the table. Small gesture, huge meaning. And Caleb watched. She felt his eyes on her when she hauled wood for the stove, when she scrubbed the floors, when she stood at the counter making dinner with hands that were blistered and raw. He didn't help, didn't interfere. Just watched with that same assessing expression he'd worn the day she arrived, like he was waiting for her to prove what she was worth. Or prove that she wasn't. 1 month in, everything changed. Mara was in the kitchen, elbow deep in dishwater, when she heard raised voices from outside. She dried her hands and moved to the window. 3 men on horseback had ridden up to the corral where Caleb and Dutch were working with a half-broken mare. The lead rider was older, well-dressed in a way that didn't belong on a working ranch. Expensive coat, polished boots, a hat that had never seen real weather. She couldn't hear what was being said, but she could read body language well enough. This wasn't a friendly visit. Caleb's posture had gone rigid, his shoulders tight. Dutch had moved closer, one hand resting casually on his belt, close to where Mara knew he kept a knife. The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes. Then the well-dressed man touched his hat brim in a gesture that was more mockery than courtesy, and the 3 riders turned and left. Caleb stood in the corral, watching them go, his hands clenched into fists. When he came inside an hour later, his expression was darker than she'd ever seen it. Mara set his dinner in front of him, venison stew, biscuits that hadn't burned, coffee, and waited. He ate in silence. Finally, she said, "Who were they?" "No one." "Didn't look like no one." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You need to worry about dinner, not my business. If your business is going to show up on this ranch making threats, it's my business too." He looked up sharply. "Who said anything about threats?" "Your face did." For a moment, she thought he might actually tell her to shut up and stay in her lane. Instead, he pushed his plate away and leaned back in his chair. "Man's name is Garrett Hail," he said. "Owns most of the land around here. Wants to own mine too." "Why?" "Because he's a vulture, and this is dying territory. Small ranches like mine are struggling. He waits until we're desperate, then makes offers we can't refuse." "You refused," Mara said. "For now. What happens when you can't?" Caleb looked at her, and for the first time she saw something other than cold assessment in his eyes. She saw exhaustion, frustration, the weight of a fight he wasn't sure he could win. "Then I lose everything I've built," he said quietly. Mara sat down across from him. How bad is it? Bad enough. He scrubbed a hand over his face. I've got debts. Equipment needs replacing. We lost 3 horses last month to colic. That's money I'll never see again. Hale knows it. He's waiting for me to fold. And if you don't, he'll find another way to take it. The words settled between them like stones. Mara thought about the $300 Caleb had paid for a bride he'd never gotten. Money that could have gone toward those debts, that equipment, those horses. Money her father had pocketed while sending the wrong daughter as a consolation prize. I'm sorry, she said. Caleb blinked. For what? For not being worth what you paid. Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or something softer that he covered quickly. That's not... He stopped. Started again. You work hard. That's worth something. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't acceptance, but it was more than she'd had before. Tomorrow, Caleb said, standing up. I need your help with the horses. Mara looked up at him. I told you I can't ride. I'm not asking you to ride, I'm asking you to help handle them. Dutch's back is bothering him, and Carter can't do it alone. What do I need to do? Show up, don't spook them, follow instructions. That's it? That's everything. The next morning, Mara found herself standing in the corral with a wild-eyed mare that looked ready to kick through the fence. Caleb stood on the other side, a lead rope in his hands, his voice low and steady as he worked to calm the animal. Move slow, he said to Mara. No sudden gestures. Horses read fear like a language. What if I am scared? Then lie better. She almost laughed. The mare settled eventually, enough for Caleb to get a halter on her. Mara handed him tools when he asked, stayed out of the way when he needed space, learned to read the subtle shifts in the horse's body that meant danger or calm. It took hours. When it was done, the mare was still wild, but she was haltered. Progress. Caleb looked at Mara over the animal's back. You did good. 2 words, no elaboration. But Mara felt them like a warm hand on her shoulder. Fog. Winter came early that year. The snow started in November and didn't stop. It piled up in drifts that blocked the road, turned the ranch into an isolated island, made every task twice as hard. Hauling water meant breaking ice. Feeding the horses meant wading through knee-deep powder. Cooking meant rationing supplies that couldn't be replaced until spring. And through it all, Mara worked. Her hands stopped bleeding eventually. Calluses formed. Her body adapted to the rhythm of hard labor, early mornings, endless cold. She learned to read weather in the color of the sky, learned which horses were gentle and which would bite, learned how to make a pound of bacon feed 4 people for 3 days. She learned how to survive. Dutch started teaching her to ride. Not because she'd asked, but because one morning he handed her a bridle and said, "About time you learned." The horse he gave her was old and patient, the kind of animal that tolerated mistakes. Mara fell off twice in the first week, got back on both times. By December, she could stay mounted for a full hour. By January, she was helping move the horses between pastures. Carter, who never wasted words, said, "You'll do." Coming from him, it was high praise. And Caleb stopped watching her like she was a problem waiting to happen. He started watching her like she was something else entirely. It happened in small moments, the way his eyes followed her when she crossed the yard, the way he handed her coffee in the morning, their fingers brushing, the way he stood a little closer than necessary when they worked together in the corral. Neither of them acknowledged it, but it was there, and Mara, who had spent her whole life being second best, felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope. The letter arrived in February. Carter brought it back from town, along with supplies and news that the roads were finally passable. He handed it to Caleb at dinner, and Caleb frowned when he saw the handwriting. "It's for you," he said, passing it to Mara. She recognized the script immediately. Her father's. Her stomach dropped. She waited until after dinner to open it, sitting alone in her room with the single candle burning low. The letter was short, blunt, typical of her father's efficiency. "Mara, Lily's marriage didn't work out. The banker's son had gambling debts. She's back home and unmarried. Mr. Rourke paid for a Whitlock bride, and he's going to get one. I'm sending Lily west in March. She'll finish what you started. You can come home if there's room on the return wagon." Father Mara read it 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, walked to the fireplace, and burned it. She didn't tell Caleb. Not that night. Not the next day. Not the day after that. She told herself it was because she needed time to think, to figure out what to do. But the truth was simpler and uglier than that. She didn't want to leave. This ranch, this brutal life, these hard men who barely spoke. It had become hers. And the thought of walking away, of letting Lily sweep in and take it all, it made her want to scream. But 3 weeks later, when the wagon appeared on the horizon, Mara knew her time was up. She was standing in the yard when it arrived, her hands wet from laundry, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack a rib. The wagon stopped. The driver climbed down. And then Lily stepped into the Wyoming sunlight like she was descending from a stage. She was exactly as Mara remembered. Golden hair swept up in perfect curls despite the journey, a traveling dress that somehow looked fresh, skin like porcelain, eyes like summer sky, a smile that could make grown men forget their own names. She saw Mara and her smile widened. "Sister," she said warmly, "I've come to rescue you." Behind Mara, the door to the house opened. Caleb stepped out, and for the first time since Mara had arrived, she saw him look at a woman the way men were supposed to look at women, like she was everything he'd been waiting for. Lily turned that smile on him, and Mara watched her sister do what she'd always done best. She made herself impossible to resist. "Mr. Rourke," Lily said, extending a delicate hand. "I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. I'm here now to make everything right." Caleb took her hand. "Miss Whitlock," he said. And in that moment, Mara understood exactly how this was going to end. She was going to lose. Again. Mara's hands were still wet from the laundry when Lily wrapped her in an embrace that smelled of rosewater and long-distance travel. "You poor thing," Lily murmured, loud enough for Caleb to hear. "Look at your hands. Look at what this place has done to you." Mara pulled back, but Lily held on, her grip surprisingly firm beneath the delicate performance. "I'm fine," Mara said. "You're destroyed." Lily turned those blue eyes toward Caleb, still standing on the porch. "Mr. Rourke, I cannot thank you enough for taking care of my sister in my absence. I know this wasn't what you expected, and I'm here to make it right." Caleb's expression was unreadable. "She's been managing." "I'm sure she has." Lily's smile was radiant. "But you didn't pay for someone to manage. You paid for a wife." The words landed like a slap. Dutch had emerged from the barn, Carter behind him. Both men stood watching, their faces careful and blank. The driver was already unloading Lily's trunk, a massive thing that probably cost more than everything Mara owned combined. "Let's get you inside," Caleb said to Lily. "You must be tired from the journey." "Exhausted," Lily agreed. She released Mara and took Caleb's offered arm, moving toward the house like she'd been living there for years. At the door, she paused. "Mara, would you bring my trunk to the spare room, and perhaps some tea?" Then she disappeared inside with Caleb, leaving Mara standing in the yard with wet hands and a chest full of broken glass. Dutch walked over, his weathered face troubled. "That your sister?" "Yes." "She doesn't look much like you." "No," Mara said. "She doesn't." Carter grabbed one end of the trunk. "Come on, let's get this inside before it snows again." Mara took the other end. The trunk weighed as much as a grown man, filled with dresses and underthings, and all the things a proper wife would bring to a frontier marriage. They hauled it through the door and into the spare room, Mara's room, where Lily was already examining the space with an expression of polite horror. "This is charming," Lily said, in a tone that meant the opposite. She touched the rough wooden walls, the simple bed. "Rustic." "It's clean," Mara said. "Of course it is. You've always been practical." Lily turned to Caleb, who'd followed them in. "Is there another room? I'd hate to displace my sister." "The other bedroom's mine," Caleb said. Pink touched Lily's cheeks, a blush so perfect it might have been painted on. "Oh, well, I suppose we'll need to discuss arrangements, won't we? But not today. Today I'm too tired to think straight." She was good. Mara had forgotten how good. "I'll make tea," Mara heard herself say. She left before anyone could respond, walking back to the kitchen where the water was still boiling from laundry. Her hands shook as she prepared the tea tray. The good cups, the sugar they usually saved, everything arranged just so. When she brought it to the main room, Lily was sitting by the fire, her traveling cloak draped artfully over the chair, her hair catching the light like spun gold. Caleb sat across from her, and they were talking. A terrible journey, Lily was saying. 3 different trains, and the last wagon was absolutely primitive. I don't know how Mara survived it alone. She's tougher than she looks, Caleb said. She always has been. Our mother used to say Mara got all the strength and I got all the sense. Lily laughed, light and musical. Though I'm not sure either of us got enough of either. Mara set the tea tray down harder than necessary. Lily looked up, her smile unwavering. Thank you, sister. You're so thoughtful. Dinner's in 2 hours, Mara said. I need to finish the laundry. She walked out before Lily could respond, before Caleb could see her face, before the jealousy clawing at her throat could turn into something uglier. Outside, the sky was iron gray and threatening snow. Mara went back to the washtub, plunged her hands into water that had gone cold, and scrubbed until her knuckles bled. That night at dinner, Lily charmed everyone. She asked Dutch about the horses with genuine interest, listened to Carter's brief responses like they were poetry, and treated Caleb with a combination of deference and wit that made him almost smile. She ate the venison stew Mara had made and declared it wonderful, though Mara knew it was tough and oversalted. You've done such a good job keeping things running, Lily said to Mara as they cleared the plates. I can see why Mr. Rourke kept you on. Kept you on. Like Mara was hired help, which technically she was. I do what needs doing, Mara said, and you do it so well. Lily's hand rested briefly on Mara's shoulder. But you must be exhausted. All this work, all these months, you can rest now. I'll take over. I'm not tired. Of course you are. Look at you. You're worn to the bone. Lily lowered her voice, though not enough to keep the men from hearing. Father told me what happened. How you came here instead of me. How you've been working like a servant. I'm so sorry, Mara. I never meant for any of this. You ran off with a banker's son, Mara said flatly. What did you think would happen? Pain flickered across Lily's face. Real pain, or a perfect imitation of it. I made a mistake. I was foolish and selfish, and I've paid for it. Thomas had debts I didn't know about. Gambling, drinking. He wasn't who I thought he was. She straightened, lifting her chin. But I'm here now to make things right, to honor the commitment Father made. How noble of you. Mara. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. Please don't hate me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but you're my sister. We're all we have. Mara looked at her, really looked at her. The perfect face, the careful tears gathering in those blue eyes, the performance polished to such a high shine, you couldn't see the manipulation underneath. But Mara could see it. She'd spent her whole life watching Lily work. I don't hate you, Mara said quietly, but I don't trust you either. Lily's expression hardened for just a moment, a crack in the facade, before the sweetness returned. I understand. I'll prove myself to you, to everyone. She walked back to the table where Caleb was finishing his coffee. Mr. Rourke, Lily said, would you show me the ranch tomorrow? I'd love to see what you've built here. If the weather holds, Caleb said. Wonderful. Lily's smile could have melted the snow. I'm so looking forward to learning everything. That night, Mara lay in the main room on a makeshift bed by the fire, her room given over to Lily, and stared at the ceiling. Through the thin walls, she could hear Lily humming as she prepared for bed, the sound sweet and carefree. Mara closed her eyes and tried not to think about how easily she could be replaced. The next morning, Lily appeared at breakfast in a riding habit that must have cost a month's wages. It was impractical and beautiful, tailored to show her figure, the dark blue fabric making her eyes even more striking. Dutch looked at it and said, You planning to ride in that? Is something wrong with it? Lily asked. You'll freeze, and if you fall, that skirt'll tangle in the stirrups and drag you. Oh. Lily's hand went to her throat. I didn't think about that. I suppose I need something more practical. Mara's got work clothes, Caleb said. You're about the same size. They weren't the same size. Lily was smaller, more delicate. But Mara went to her trunk anyway and pulled out her spare dress, the one that was already wearing thin, the one she'd been saving for when her current dress finally gave out. Lily changed in the bedroom and emerged looking like a girl playing dress-up. The dress hung loose on her frame, the practical wool making her look washed out instead of beautiful. Well, Lily said, laughing, I suppose this will do. She followed Caleb outside, and Mara watched from the window as he helped her onto the gentle mare Dutch had taught Mara to ride on. Lily sat the horse beautifully. She'd had riding lessons as a girl back when their father still had money for such things. They rode toward the northern pasture, Lily talking and Caleb listening, and Mara turned away before she could see more. She threw herself into work, cleaned the house top to bottom even though it didn't need it, mended clothes that had been sitting in the basket for weeks, made bread from scratch, kneading the dough until her arms ached. Dutch found her in the kitchen around noon. "You all right?" he asked. "Fine. You're cleaning like someone died." Mara didn't answer. Dutch poured himself coffee and sat at the table. "That sister of yours is trouble. She's beautiful. Beautiful women usually are." He sipped his coffee, watching Mara over the rim. "Caleb's not stupid. He knows what he's looking at. A woman he paid $300 for. Maybe. Or maybe he's just being polite to a guest." "She's not a guest, Dutch. She's his fiancée. The real one. The one he wanted from the start." Dutch was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want?" The question caught Mara off guard. "What? You. What do you want to happen here?" Mara's hand stilled in the dishwater. Nobody had ever asked her that before. Her whole life had been about what other people wanted, what other people needed, what other people decided. "I want to stay," she said quietly. "Then fight for it." "How? Look at her. Look at me." "There's no fight. There's just facts. Facts can change." Dutch stood, setting his cup in the sink. "But not if you roll over and quit." He left before Mara could respond. She stood at the sink, staring at her reflection in the window. Her hands were rough, her face wind-burned, her hair pulled back in a braid that had stopped being neat somewhere around dawn. She looked like what she was, a woman who worked for a living. Lily looked like a dream. There was no competition. Caleb and Lily returned as the sun was starting to set, both of them flushed from the cold. Lily was laughing at something Caleb had said, her hand resting lightly on his arm as he helped her dismount. At dinner, she entertained them with stories from Philadelphia, parties and theater, and the kind of life that felt like fiction in this hard place. She made even Dutch smile, and Carter actually asked her a question. "You really meet the governor?" Carter asked. "Twice," Lily said. "Once at a charity ball, once at my friend's wedding. He's very tall in person, and his wife has the most extraordinary collection of jewels." She talked about music and art and culture, things that had no place on a Wyoming ranch but felt exotic and fascinating anyway. She was worldly in a way Mara could never be, educated in a way their father had prioritized for his beautiful daughter, but not his practical one. And Caleb listened like a man who'd been starving and didn't know it. After dinner, Lily offered to help clean up. Mara almost laughed. "You don't need to," Mara said. "I want to. I should learn how things work around here." Lily picked up a dish towel and looked at it like it might bite her. "How do you manage this every day?" "Practice." They worked in silence for a few minutes, Mara washing and Lily drying with careful, inefficient movements. "He's a good man," Lily said finally. Mara's hands tightened on the plate. "Yes." "Rough around the edges, but good, honest, the kind of man who keeps his word." Lily set a dried plate on the stack. "Father chose well, better than I did with Thomas." "Why did you come back?" Mara asked. "You could have stayed in Philadelphia, found someone else." "With a failed elopement and no prospects? I'm damaged goods now, Mara. This is my second chance, maybe my last chance." There was truth in that. Mara knew how the world worked, how quickly a woman's reputation could be destroyed, how few options remained once that happened. "What about me?" Mara asked quietly. Lily looked at her, and for a moment, the mask slipped. Mara saw calculation there, and guilt, and something harder. "You'll be taken care of. Father said there's room on the return wagon. You can come home." Home. Mara tasted the word. To do what? Be your spinster sister? Help raise your children? Would that be so terrible? Yes. The word came out sharper than Mara intended. Lily flinched. "I've worked for this," Mara continued. "For 4 months, I've hauled water and scrubbed floors and learned to handle horses. I've earned my place here." "You've earned a place," Lily corrected gently, "but not the place that was promised to me. You gave up that promise when you ran away, and I'm here to claim it back." Lily's voice was soft but firm. I'm sorry, Mara. I truly am. But this is how it has to be. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to scream, wanted to throw the dish she was holding and watch it shatter. Instead, she finished washing it and set it carefully in the rinse water. We'll see, she said. The next week was torture. Lily settled into the ranch like she'd been there all along. She took over the cooking, badly at first, burning everything Mara made look easy. But she improved quickly. She was smart enough to watch and learn, clever enough to ask Dutch and Carter for advice, sweet enough to make them want to help her. She struggled with the laundry and gave up after one attempt, her hands too soft for the harsh soap and rough work. She couldn't haul water without stopping to rest. She scared the horses more often than she calmed them. But none of that mattered, because when she sat by the fire in the evening, mending one of Caleb's shirts with careful, imperfect stitches, she looked like what a wife was supposed to look like. When she poured coffee with a shy smile, she seemed like the kind of woman a man would want to come home to. When she asked Caleb about his day, about his plans, about his dreams, she made him feel like those things mattered. Mara could work circles around her, but Caleb had never looked at Mara the way he looked at Lily. 10 days after Lily arrived, Garrett Hail came back. He rode up with the same two men, the same expensive clothes, the same predatory smile. But this time, when he saw Lily standing on the porch, his expression shifted. Well, he said, dismounting, this is unexpected. Lily curtsied, actually curtsied, like they were at a ball instead of a muddy ranch yard. Mr. Hail, I presume? At your service, Miss? Whitlock, Lily Whitlock. She smiled. Mr. Rourke's fiancée. Hale's eyes sharpened. I wasn't aware Mr. Rourke had a fiancée. Recent development, Caleb said from the doorway. His voice was flat, carefully neutral. Congratulations. Hale didn't sound sincere. I suppose this changes things. How so? Caleb asked. A man with a wife has different priorities, different needs. The offer I made last month, I could sweeten it, make sure you and your lovely bride have a comfortable start somewhere else. The answer's still no. That's hasty. Hale's gaze swept over the ranch, lingering on the corrals, the barn, the house that needed repairs. This is hard country, Mr. Rourke. Hard on a man, harder on a woman like Miss Whitlock. He turned his smile on Lily. You're from Philadelphia, I'd wager. City life. This must be quite an adjustment. It is, Lily admitted, but I'm learning. Learning is admirable, but there's a difference between learning and surviving. Hale's tone was friendly, conversational. Spring's coming. That means the thaw, and the thaw means mud, and mud means sick animals and lost profits. Summer means drought. Fall means early snow. It's a cycle that grinds men down, Miss Whitlock, men tougher than your fiancé. That's enough, Caleb said. I'm just being realistic. Hale swung back into his saddle. Think about it, Rourke. Think about what you're asking this lovely woman to endure. My offer stands through the end of the month. After that, the price drops. He rode away, his men following. Lily's hand was shaking when she lowered it from her throat. Is he always like that? She asked. Yes, Caleb said. And he wants the ranch? He wants everything. Lily looked at Caleb, then at the land spreading out around them. Why? It's so harsh. It's mine. Something in his voice made Lily pause. She studied his face, then nodded slowly. I understand. But Mara, watching from the kitchen window, wasn't sure Lily understood at all. That night, Mara was washing the dinner dishes when Lily appeared beside her. I need to talk to you, Lily said. Mara didn't look up. So talk. Not here. Outside. They walked to the barn where the cold air bit through their shawls and the horses shifted in their stalls. Lily wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. This was a mistake, Lily said. Mara's heart jumped. What? Coming here, thinking I could just slide into this life. Lily's laugh was bitter. I don't know how to do this, Mara. The work, the isolation, the constant cold. And that man today, Hale, the way he looked at this place like it was already his. It's not his, Mara said. It's Caleb's. For now. But for how long? Lily turned to face her. Caleb's struggling. I can see it, even if he won't admit it. The ranch is barely holding on, and one bad season could destroy everything. And if I marry him, I'll be destroyed right along with it. Then don't marry him. I have to. Lily's voice was small. I have nowhere else to go, no other options. But Mara, she grabbed Mara's hand. What if there was another way? What way? What if we worked together, you and me? You know how to run this place, how to work, how to survive. I know how to manage people, to make connections. We could combine our strengths. Mara pulled her hand free. You want me to stay? Work for you while you play wife? Not for me. With me. As partners. Lily's eyes were bright with desperation or calculation. Mara couldn't tell which. Think about it. Together we might actually save this place. Apart we'll all lose. Why would I help you take something that could have been mine? Because it was never going to be yours, Lily said quietly. Not really. Caleb paid for me, Mara. He wanted me. You were just filling in. The truth of it hit like a fist. And if I say no, Mara asked, then I'll marry him anyway, and you'll leave, and this ranch will probably fail within the year. We'll all lose. Lily stepped closer. But if you stay, if you help, maybe we all win. Mara looked at her sister, seeing the fear beneath the beauty, the desperation beneath the charm. Lily was scared, really scared, and for the first time Mara realized her sister wasn't here because she wanted to be. She was here because she had to be, just like Mara. I need to think, Mara said. Don't think too long. Caleb's going to propose soon. I can feel it. Lily walked back to the house, leaving Mara alone with the horses and the cold and a choice that felt impossible. 3 days later, Caleb asked Lily to marry him. He did it quietly, after dinner, with Dutch and Carter conspicuously absent and Mara cleaning in the kitchen. But the walls were thin, and Mara heard every word. Miss Whitlock, Caleb said. Lily, I know this isn't romantic. I know I'm not offering you the life you probably imagined, but I'm offering you honesty, partnership, a place that's yours if you want it. I want it, Lily said softly. Then I'd be honored if you'd marry me, properly, the way it should have been from the start. There was a pause, then Lily's voice, warm and happy. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Mara's hand stopped moving in the dishwater. It was done. She'd lost. She dried her hands and walked into the main room. Caleb and Lily stood by the fire, not touching but close enough that they might as well be. Congratulations, Mara said. Caleb looked at her and something flickered in his expression. Guilt, maybe. Or relief that she wasn't making this difficult. Thank you, he said. When's the wedding? 2 weeks, Lily said. In town. The circuit preacher will be through then. 2 weeks, 14 days. Mara nodded. I'll help however I can. She went back to the kitchen, finished the dishes, and retreated to her makeshift bed by the fire. She lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything she was losing pressed down on her chest. Tomorrow, she would ask Dutch about the return wagon. Tomorrow, she would start packing. Tomorrow, she would figure out how to leave. But tonight, she let herself break. Silently. Completely. And in the morning, when she woke before dawn to build the fire and make breakfast, she buried the pieces so deep nobody would ever find them. The wedding dress arrived 6 days before the ceremony. Mara carried the box inside, feeling the weight of silk and lace through the cardboard, and set it on Lily's bed without a word. Her sister had ordered it from a seamstress in town, paid for with money their father had sent, money that could have gone toward Caleb's debts, but went toward making Lily beautiful instead. Lily opened the box with trembling fingers, pulling out layers of ivory fabric that caught the afternoon light. It was simple by city standards, but extravagant for a frontier wedding. Pearl buttons down the back, lace at the collar and cuffs, a skirt that would need careful handling to keep from dragging in the mud. It's perfect, Lily breathed. Mara looked at it and felt nothing. She'd spent the last 6 days moving through the ranch like a ghost, doing her work with mechanical precision, speaking only when spoken to. Dutch watched her with concerned eyes. Carter gave her extra space. And Caleb avoided her entirely. He threw himself into ranch work with an intensity that bordered on reckless. He was gone before dawn and didn't return until after dark, taking his meals standing up, sleeping in the barn more nights than not. Mara told herself it was because of the upcoming wedding, because he had things to prepare. But she knew better. He couldn't look at her, and that was somehow worse than everything else. "Will you help me try it on?" Lily asked. Mara wanted to refuse, wanted to walk out of the room and never come back. But she was still here, still playing the role of dutiful sister, and some habits were too deeply carved to break. "Turn around," Mara said. She helped Lily into the dress, her fingers working the tiny buttons with practiced efficiency. The fabric whispered against skin, settling into place like it had been made for Lily specifically, which, of course, it had been. When Mara finished, Lily turned to the small mirror propped on the dresser. She was radiant. The dress transformed her from beautiful to something else entirely. Something that belonged in paintings or fairy tales, not on a struggling ranch in the middle of nowhere. Her reflection glowed in the dim room, and for a moment Mara understood exactly why Caleb had chosen her, why anyone would choose her. "What do you think?" Lily asked softly. "You look like a bride," Mara said. "But do I look like his bride?" The question caught Mara off guard. She met Lily's eyes in the mirror and saw something unexpected there. Doubt. "What do you mean?" Mara asked. Lily's hand smoothed over the silk. "He doesn't talk to me." "Not really. We have conversations about the weather and the horses and what needs fixing, but he doesn't—" She stopped, searching for words. "He doesn't see me." "He asked you to marry him." "Because I'm what he paid for, what he's supposed to want." Lily turned away from the mirror. "But I don't think he wants me at all." Mara should have felt satisfaction at that, should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt something closer to pity. "Then why are you going through with it?" Mara asked. "Because wanting and needing are different things." Lily's voice was matter of fact. "He needs a wife. I need a husband. That's enough." "Is it?" "It has to be." Lily started unbuttoning the dress, her movements quick and efficient, all the softness gone. "Help me out of this. I don't want to wear it until the wedding." Mara helped, and when the dress was carefully folded back in its box, Lily sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her hands. "I'm scared," she admitted. It was the first honest thing she'd said in days. "Of what?" Mara asked. "Everything. Failing at this, failing him. Watching this ranch collapse and knowing I couldn't stop it." Lily's laugh was hollow. "I'm not like you, Mara. I can't just work harder and make things better. I don't know how to survive here." "Then learn." "I've been trying, but trying isn't enough when the land wants you dead and the man you're marrying barely tolerates you." Mara sat down beside her sister. The bed creaked under their combined weight. "He doesn't hate you," Mara said quietly. "No, he's just indifferent, which is worse." Lily wiped at her eyes, careful not to smudge anything. "Do you know what the worst part is? I actually like him. He's honest and hardworking and decent. In another life, in another situation, I think I could have—" She stopped. "But it doesn't matter. This isn't a love story. It's a transaction. Most marriages are." "Were you hoping yours wouldn't be?" The question landed like a blade between Mara's ribs. "I wasn't hoping for a marriage at all," Mara said. "I was just hoping to stay." Lily looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment they weren't the beautiful sister and the practical one. They were just two women trapped by circumstances neither had chosen, trying to survive in a world that didn't care about their happiness. "I'm sorry," Lily said. "For what?" "For taking this from you, for being the one he chose, for—" Lily's voice cracked. "For being born beautiful, for being the daughter father valued, for having choices even when they were terrible ones." Mara didn't know what to say to that. They sat in silence until the light outside started to fade, and then Lily stood up and smoothed her dress. "I should start dinner," she said. "I'll do it," Mara offered. "No, I need to practice. I need to be useful." Lily managed a weak smile. "Besides, in a week, this will all be my responsibility anyway." She left, and Mara sat alone in the room that used to be hers, surrounded by someone else's wedding dress and someone else's future. The next morning, Dutch found Mara in the barn. She was mucking out stalls, working with grim determination, her movements sharp and angry. Dutch leaned against the door and watched for a minute before speaking. "You planning to murder that hay?" he asked. "It deserves it." "What did it ever do to you?" Mara drove the pitchfork into the ground and turned to face him. "Did you need something?" Yeah, I need you to stop acting like the world ended. It did. No, Dutch said firmly. It changed. That's different. Feels the same from where I'm standing. Dutch walked into the stall and picked up a shovel. He started working alongside her, moving with the steady rhythm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. You know what I did before I came here? Dutch asked. Mara didn't answer. I was a soldier, cavalry, fought in the Indian Wars, saw things that still wake me up at night. When it was over, I tried going back to civilization. Couldn't do it. Too much noise, too many people, too many memories. He paused, leaning on the shovel. So I came out here, middle of nowhere. Figured I'd work until I died or the land killed me, whichever came first. Why are you telling me this? Mara asked. Because I thought my life was over. Thought there was nothing left worth fighting for. And then I found this place, and Caleb, and work that mattered, and I realized I'd been wrong. Dutch met her eyes. Life doesn't end just because the story you wanted doesn't happen. It just becomes a different story. A worse story, maybe. Or maybe one you can't see the value of yet. He went back to shoveling. You've got a choice to make, Mara. You can leave. Go back east. Find something else. Start over. Or you can stay and figure out what your life here looks like now. There's no life for me here. Lily's going to be his wife. I'll just be... You'll be whatever you decide to be. The simplicity of it made Mara want to scream. It's not that easy, she said. Never said it was easy. Said it was a choice. Dutch finished his section of the stall and put the shovel away. At the door he paused. For what it's worth, he said, I think you leaving would be a damn shame. You're the best thing that's happened to this ranch in years. But that's just an old soldier's opinion. You've got to decide what you think. He left before Mara could respond. She stood in the barn, surrounded by hay and horse smell and the physical proof of work she'd done, and tried to imagine leaving. Tried to picture herself on a wagon heading east, back to a city she'd never belonged in, back to a father who'd traded her like livestock, back to a life of being the spare daughter. She couldn't do it, but she couldn't imagine staying either. The wedding was 4 days away when Garrett Hail showed up again. This time he didn't bring his men. He came alone, on a black horse that probably cost more than everything Caleb owned, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mara was hanging laundry when he rode up. Caleb was in the north pasture with Carter. Lily was inside, attempting to bake bread. Dutch was somewhere on the property, fixing fence. Hale dismounted and touched his hat to Mara. Miss Whitlock, he said. The younger one, if I'm not mistaken. Mara, she said. Of course. Mara, I was hoping to speak with your sister. She's busy. I'm sure she is, wedding preparations and all. Hale's smile widened. Perhaps you could give her a message for me. Depends on the message. Just a friendly warning. The bank in town holds Mr. Rourke's notes. They're coming due at the end of the month. Same time as the wedding, coincidentally. Mara's hand stilled on the laundry. What are you saying? I'm saying that Mr. Rourke is about to have a very difficult conversation about money he doesn't have. And when that happens, he's going to need options. Hale's tone was pleasant, conversational. My offer still stands. I'll buy the ranch, pay off his debts, and he can start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere easier for a new bride. He'll never sell. He might not have a choice. The bank won't extend his credit again. They've been patient, but patience has limits. Hale swung back into his saddle. Tell your sister congratulations from me, and tell Mr. Rourke to think carefully about what kind of life he's asking her to share. He rode away, leaving Mara standing in the yard with wet sheets in her hands and ice in her stomach. She found Lily in this kitchen, flour-dusted and frustrated, staring at a loaf of bread that had somehow turned into a brick. I don't understand, Lily said. I followed the recipe exactly. You probably overworked the dough. Mara set the bread aside. Lily, we need to talk. If this is about the bread, it's about the ranch, about Caleb's debts. Lily's expression shifted. What about them? Mara told her everything Hale had said. As she talked, she watched her sister's face go pale, then set into hard lines. How much does he owe? Lily asked. I don't know. He's never said. But it's enough that the bank could take the ranch? That's what Hale implied. Lily sat down heavily at the table. This is worse than I thought. You knew it was bad. I knew it was struggling. I didn't know it was dying. Lily's hands twisted together. If the bank forecloses, we lose everything. I lose everything, Lily corrected. You were planning to leave anyway. The truth of that sat between them. Mara pulled out a chair and sat down across from her sister. How much money do you have? What? From father? From the banker's son? From wherever? How much? Lily's jaw tightened. That's none of your business. It is if it could save this place. I have maybe $200. Money father sent for the wedding, plus what I managed to keep from... She stopped. It's not enough. Not if Caleb owes more than that. But it's something. It's my security. Lily's voice rose. If this marriage fails, if Caleb can't make the ranch work, that money is all I have. I can't just give it to him. Even if it means losing the ranch? Even then, I'm not a fool, Mara. I've watched women give everything to men who squander it. I've seen what happens when you have nothing left. Her eyes were fierce. I won't be that woman. Mara understood. She hated that she understood, but she did. Then we need another solution, Mara said. What solution? We're two women with no money, no influence, and no options. What exactly are we supposed to do? Before Mara could answer, the door opened and Caleb walked in. He looked between them, reading the tension immediately. What's wrong? Hail was here, Mara said. Caleb's expression went dark. What did he want? To remind you about your debts, to offer to buy the ranch again. He can go to hell. Can you pay what you owe? Lily asked quietly. Caleb's silence was answer enough. How much? Lily pressed. It's not your concern. I'm going to be your wife in 4 days. It's absolutely my concern. Caleb leaned against the counter, exhaustion written in every line of his body. $500, plus interest. The bank wants it by the end of the month or they foreclose. The number hung in the air like smoke. That's more than you paid for. Lily stopped herself. That's more than we have. I know. So what are you going to do? I don't know. Caleb's voice was rough. I've been trying to figure it out for months. I thought if I could break enough horses, sell enough stock, maybe I'd have time. But the market's down, buyers are scarce, and I'm running out of options. You could sell to Hail, Lily said. No. Caleb, I said no. His tone left no room for argument. I'll figure something out, I always do. But he didn't sound convinced. He left, the door closing harder than necessary behind him. Lily looked at Mara. We're going to lose everything, aren't we? Maybe. And there's nothing we can do? Mara thought about Dutch's words, about choices and different stories, about the fact that she was still here, still fighting, even when she'd planned to leave. There might be something, Mara said slowly. What? I need to check something first. Can you keep Caleb occupied tonight? Why? Because I need to go through his papers, find out exactly what we're dealing with. Lily's eyes widened. That's the only way to know the truth. Will you help me or not? A long pause. Then Lily nodded. I'll keep him busy, she said. That night, while Lily engaged Caleb in a long conversation about wedding details, Mara slipped into his room. She felt like a thief, moving through his private space, touching his things. But she pushed past the guilt and focused on what mattered. The papers were in a trunk under his bed. Loan documents, receipts, correspondence with the bank. Mara spread them out on the floor and read by candlelight, piecing together the full picture of Caleb's financial situation. It was worse than she'd thought. The $500 was just the immediate debt. There were equipment loans, feed bills, outstanding payments to suppliers. If the bank foreclosed, everything would cascade. Caleb would lose not just the ranch, but everything he'd built over the last decade. But buried in the papers, Mara found something else. A letter from a horse trader in Montana, dated 3 months ago. An offer to buy Caleb's entire breeding stock, the wild horses he'd been breaking, for $700. Enough to cover everything with money left over. Caleb had refused. Mara stared at the letter, reading it twice to make sure she understood. He'd had a way out, an answer to all his problems. And he'd said no, because selling the breeding stock meant giving up his future. It meant losing the foundation of everything he was trying to build. It meant choosing survival over hope. Mara carefully put the papers back, exactly as she'd found them, and slipped out of the room. She found Lily in the main room, alone, staring at the fire. "Well?" Lily asked. "It's bad. Worse than he said." "How much worse?" "Much. He owes money to everyone. The 500 to the bank is just the start. If he can't pay that, everything else comes due too." Lily closed her eyes. "So we're doomed?" "Not necessarily." Mara sat down. "There was an offer, a horse trader willing to pay 700 for the breeding stock. Caleb turned it down." "Why would he—" Lily stopped. "Because it's the horses. They're what makes this place work." "Exactly. Without them, he's just another failed ranch." "So he chose the ranch over the money, over his future, over—" Lily's voice caught. "Over me." "He chose hope," Mara said quietly, "even when it was stupid, even when it might destroy him." They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. "I can't live like this," Lily said finally, "always on the edge of disaster, always one bad season from losing everything. That's not a life, Mara. That's just slow dying." "Then leave." Lily looked at her, shocked. "What?" "Leave. Tell him the truth. Tell him you can't do this. Get on the next wagon east and don't look back." "I can't." "Why not? You don't love him. He doesn't love you. This marriage is just two desperate people making a bad situation worse. But if I leave, he'll find another way. Or he won't. Either way, it's not your problem." Lily stood up, pacing. "You want me to leave. You've wanted me to leave since I arrived." "Yes." The honesty of it seemed to surprise them both. "Why?" Lily asked. "So you can have him? So you can be the one who saves the day?" "No. So everyone can stop pretending this is something it's not." "And what is it?" "A mistake," Mara said. "A series of mistakes that started when Father sent me instead of you, and doesn't get better just because you showed up late." Lily's face crumpled. "I don't have anywhere else to go." "Yes, you do. You have $200 and a face men fall in love with. You could go anywhere, be anyone. You're choosing this because it's safe, not because it's right." "And what about you?" Lily demanded. "What are you choosing?" Mara didn't have an answer for that. The wedding was 2 days away when Mara found the envelope. It was addressed to her, slipped under the kitchen door sometime during the night. No marking, no indication of who'd left it. Inside was a single piece of paper and a bank draft for $600. Mara stared at the amount, her hands shaking. The letter was short. "Miss Whitlock, I understand you're in a difficult position. I also understand that Mr. Rourke's situation is becoming untenable. Consider this an investment in your future, whatever shape that takes. The money is yours, no strings attached. Use it as you see fit. Should you wish to discuss options, I'm available. G.H. Garrett Hail." Mara read the letter 3 times, her mind racing. $600. More than enough to pay off the bank, to save the ranch, to give Caleb breathing room. But from Hail, the man trying to take everything. She should burn it, should throw it in Caleb's face and tell him what Hail tried to do. Instead, she folded the bank draft carefully and put it in her pocket. And she started planning. Mara spent the entire next day trying to convince herself to destroy the bank draft. She went about her work with mechanical precision, hauling water, scrubbing floors, preparing meals, while the paper burned a hole in her pocket. $600. A fortune. Enough to save everything, and poison all the same. She knew what Hale wanted. He didn't give money away out of kindness. This was bait, pure and simple. Take his money, and she'd owe him. Take his money, and he'd own a piece of whatever happened next. But what choice did she have? Caleb was out of options. Lily's $200 wouldn't be enough. The wedding was tomorrow, and the day after that, the bank would come calling. Without money, Caleb would lose everything he'd built. Unless Mara did something about it. She waited until after dinner when Caleb had retreated to the barn and Lily was in her room practicing how to arrange her hair for the ceremony. Then Mara grabbed her coat and slipped outside into the bitter evening cold. Dutch was in the bunkhouse, mending a bridle by lamplight. He looked up when she knocked. "Mara, something wrong?" "I need advice," she said. He set the bridle aside and gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She did, her hands twisting in her lap. For a long moment, she couldn't find the words. Dutch waited, patient as stone. "If you had a way to save someone," Mara finally said, but it meant accepting help from the person trying to destroy them. Would you do it? Dutch's eyes sharpened. This about Hale? Maybe. What'd he offer you? Mara pulled the bank draft from her pocket and set it on the table between them. Dutch picked it up, studied it, then set it down carefully like it might explode. That's a lot of money, he said. It's enough to pay off the bank, enough to save the ranch. And what does Hale want in return? The letter says nothing, no strings attached. Dutch snorted. Men like Hale don't give away $600 for nothing. There's always strings. You just can't see them yet. I know that, but what if... Mara stopped, trying to organize her thoughts. What if it doesn't matter? What if saving the ranch is worth whatever price comes later? You asking me or telling me? I don't know. Dutch leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. Let me ask you something. Why do you care? You were planning to leave, go back east, start over. This isn't your problem anymore. It was never my problem, Mara said. Except it feels like it is. Because you worked for it. Because I belong here. The words came out raw, honest. I know I'm not supposed to. I know Lily's the one who should be standing in this kitchen, wearing that wedding dress, building a life with Caleb. But I'm the one who's been here. I'm the one who knows every horse by name, who knows which floorboards creak, who knows how Caleb takes his coffee. And I can't just walk away and pretend none of that matters. So don't, Dutch said simply. What? Don't walk away. Stay. Fight for it. With Hale's money? No, with your own. Dutch tapped the bank draft. This isn't yours. This is leverage Hale's giving you so he can take something bigger later. You use this. You'll regret it. Then what am I supposed to do? Stand by and watch everything fall apart? You're supposed to trust that the people you care about can handle their own problems. Or you're supposed to help them in a way that doesn't sell your soul in the process. Mara stared at him. That's not helpful. Didn't say it would be, said it was true. Dutch stood up and walked to the small stove in the corner, pouring 2 cups of coffee that looked like they'd been sitting there since morning. He handed her one. You want my real advice? Talk to Caleb. Tell him about the money. Let him decide. He'll refuse it. Probably. But it's his ranch, his debt, his choice. Taking that away from him, even for good reasons, that's not saving him. That's just another kind of betrayal. The words hit harder than Mara expected. She drank the terrible coffee and thought about all the times people had made choices for her. Her father sending her west instead of Lily. Caleb deciding she could stay as hired help. Lily arriving and reclaiming the life Mara had built. None of them had asked what she wanted. None of them had given her a choice. What if he makes the wrong decision? Mara asked quietly. Then he lives with it, same as everyone else. Dutch sat back down. You can't save people from themselves, Mara. You can only decide who you want to be in the mess they make. She finished her coffee and stood up. Thank you. For what? I didn't solve anything. For treating me like I matter. Dutch's expression softened. You do matter. Don't let anyone tell you different. Mara left the bunkhouse with the bank draft still in her pocket, but her mind a little clearer. She walked across the yard toward the barn, where lamplight spilled through the cracks in the door. Caleb was inside, brushing down one of the mares. He looked up when Mara entered, surprise flickering across his face. Thought you'd be inside, he said. Couldn't sleep. Yeah, me neither. He went back to brushing, the motion steady and familiar. Big day tomorrow. For you and Lily, yes. Right. Something in his tone made Mara pause. He didn't sound happy. He sounded resigned. She moved closer, watching him work. The mare stood calm under his hands, trusting him completely. It was one of the wild ones they'd brought in together, months ago. One Mara had helped gentle. Can I ask you something? Mara said. Sure. Why are you doing this? Marrying Lily. Caleb's hands stilled. Because I paid for a wife. Because I made a commitment. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. He resumed brushing, harder now. What do you want me to say, Mara? That I'm in love? That this is some great romance? It's not. It's practical. It's what needs to happen. Even if it makes everyone miserable? Who says everyone's miserable? Are you happy? Mara asked bluntly. Caleb set down the brush and turned to face her. In the lamplight, his face was all hard angles and exhaustion. Happiness isn't the point. Survival is. Building something that lasts is. I need help running this place, and Lily's here. That's all that matters. What about what she needs? What I need? What do you need, Mara? The question was quiet, almost dangerous. And suddenly they were standing too close, the air between them charged with everything they'd been carefully not saying for months. I need, Mara's voice caught. I need you to know that there's another way, that you don't have to marry someone you don't love just because you think it's what you're supposed to do. What other way? She pulled the bank draft from her pocket and held it out. This. Caleb took it, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding to cold fury in the span of seconds. Where did you get this? He demanded. Hale left it, for me. He said it was an investment, no strings attached. And you believe him? No, but it's $600, Caleb. It's enough to save the ranch. It's a noose. He shoved the paper back at her. Hale doesn't give away money. He buys people. You take this, and he owns you. He owns all of us. Maybe. Or maybe it's just money, and we're reading too much into it. You're smarter than that. Am I? Because right now, being smart means watching you lose everything because you're too proud to accept help. Caleb's jaw clenched. This isn't help. This is manipulation. Hale knows I won't take his money, so he's offering it to you instead, making you the one who has to decide whether to save me or respect my choice. That's not generosity. That's cruelty. He was right. Mara knew he was right. But she also knew that being right didn't pay debts. What if I don't care about his motivations? Mara asked. What if I just care about keeping you from losing this ranch? Why? Caleb's voice was rough. Why do you care so much? Because it's my home too. The words hung between them, raw and true. Caleb stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Something that looked like pain. It was never supposed to be your home, he said quietly. You were supposed to be temporary, fill in help until the real bride arrived. And then you just... He stopped, shaking his head. You just stayed. You worked harder than anyone I've ever seen. You made yourself essential. And now I can't imagine this place without you, but I have no right to ask you to stay because I'm marrying your sister tomorrow. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. Mara's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Then don't marry her. I have to. No, you don't. She doesn't want this either. She's scared and trapped, and she's going through with it because she thinks she has no other choice. But she does. We all do. What choice? Caleb demanded. Walk away? Let the bank take everything? Start over with nothing? Start over with the truth. Mara moved closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Stop pretending this is about duty or commitment or anything noble. You're marrying Lily because you think you should, not because you want to. And that's not fair to anyone. Fair doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters. They stood there, inches apart, the mare shifting restlessly behind them. Mara could see Caleb's throat work as he swallowed, could see the war playing out across his face. If I don't marry Lily, he said finally, what happens to her? She figures out her own life, same as the rest of us. And the ranch? We save it some other way, or we don't. But at least we do it honestly. Caleb reached out and took the bank draft from her hand. For a moment, Mara thought he might tear it up. Instead, he folded it carefully and tucked it into his pocket. I need to think, he said. The wedding's tomorrow. I know. He looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was so deep it hurt to see. I know. Mara left him there and walked back to the house with her hands shaking and her mind spinning. She'd done it. She'd told him the truth. She'd given him the choice Dutch said he deserved. Now she just had to live with whatever he decided. Inside, the house was dark except for a single lamp burning in the main room. Lily sat at the table, still dressed, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. Couldn't sleep? Mara asked. I heard you leave. Figured you went to talk to Dutch. Lily looked up, her face pale in the lamplight. Or to Caleb. Both. What did you tell them? Mara sat down across from her. The truth, that this wedding is a mistake, that nobody wants it except our father, and he's 2,000 miles away. Lily's laugh was bitter. And what did Caleb say? That he needs to think. One day before the wedding, that's not much time for thinking. Then maybe he should have been thinking all along. They sat in silence for a moment, two sisters who'd never really understood each other, united by the disaster they'd created together. I'm not going to marry him, Lily said suddenly. Mara looked up sharply. What? I can't do it. I thought I could. I thought if I just went through with it, everything would work out somehow. But it won't. He doesn't want me, I don't want this life, and all we're doing is making each other miserable. Lily's voice was steady, certain. I'm leaving. When? Tonight. There's a wagon heading east at dawn. I already arranged passage. Does Caleb know? Not yet. I'll leave him a letter. Lily met Mara's eyes. I'm sorry. I know you probably think I'm running away again, and maybe I am, but I'd rather run than trap us both in a marriage that destroys everyone involved. Mara should have felt triumphant, should have felt vindicated. Instead, she just felt tired. What will you do? Mara asked. Go to California. I have enough money to get there, and I hear there are opportunities for women willing to work. Maybe I'll teach. Maybe I'll find another husband. Maybe I'll figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be what everyone else wants. Lily stood up. What about you? I don't know. Are you going to stay? Try to build something with Caleb? I don't know that either. Lily walked around the table and pulled Mara into an embrace. It was awkward and unexpected, and it felt like goodbye. For what it's worth, Lily whispered, I think you deserve him. You've earned this place in a way I never could. I hope he's smart enough to see that. Then she let go and walked to her room, leaving Mara alone with her thoughts and the dying fire. Mara woke before dawn to the sound of a wagon pulling away. She stumbled out of bed and ran to the window just in time to see Lily's silhouette disappearing down the road, the wedding dress left behind in a box on the porch. Gone. Just like that. Mara stood at the window watching the sky lighten from black to gray and felt something break loose in her chest. Relief, maybe. Or terror. Or both. Behind her, a door opened. Caleb stood in the doorway to his room, dressed but disheveled, a piece of paper in his hand. Lily's letter. She left, he said. I know. She said I should marry you instead, that you're the one who belongs here. Mara turned to face him. That's not why you should marry someone. No, it's not. Caleb crossed the room and stood in front of her, close enough that she could see he hadn't slept. But it's true anyway. You do belong here, more than she ever did, more than anyone. Caleb, let me finish. He took a breath. I was going to marry Lily because I thought it was what I owed her, what I owed your father, what I owed the commitment I made. But the truth is, every time I looked at her, I was thinking about you, wishing you were the one I'd sent for, wishing I had the right to ask you to stay. Mara's throat tightened. You're saying this because she left. I'm saying this because it's true, and because I'm tired of pretending it's not. He reached out and took her hand, his palm rough against hers. I don't have anything to offer you. The ranch is failing, I'm in debt up to my neck, and my best plan involves selling off everything I've built. But if you'll stay, if you'll help me fight for this place, I swear I'll spend every day proving you didn't make a mistake. That's not a proposal, Mara said, her voice shaking. It's all I've got. She looked at their joined hands, thinking about all the months she'd spent convincing herself she didn't want this, convincing herself she was fine being second best, being the substitute, being the one who stayed because she had nowhere else to go. But that wasn't true anymore. She stayed because she wanted to, because this ranch, this man, this hard life, it was hers. The bank draft from Hail, Mara said. We can't use it. I know. Which means we need another plan. I know that too. And even if we figure something out, there's no guarantee this works. We could lose everything anyway. I know. Caleb's hand tightened on hers. But I'd rather lose everything fighting alongside you than win with someone I don't love. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't romantic. It was honest and raw and exactly what Mara needed to hear. All right, she said. I'll stay. And marry me? Eventually, after we save the ranch. After we figure out if we can actually stand living together without someone forcing us to. Deal. Caleb pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. We're going to figure this out. We'd better. Because I didn't come this far just to watch it all fall apart. They stood there as the sun rose, two people who'd been thrown together by accident and chosen each other despite everything, and Mara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. The knock on the door came an hour later. Mara was making breakfast while Caleb explained Lily's departure to Dutch and Carter, both men taking the news with varying degrees of surprise, and something that looked suspiciously like relief. Caleb opened the door to find a man in a suit carrying a leather case. Behind him stood a woman Mara didn't recognize, middle-aged and severe, with a ledger tucked under her arm. "Mr. Rourke," the man said. "I'm Thomas Brennan from the First Bank of Wyoming. This is Mrs. Patricia Holbrook from the Territorial Land Office. We need to speak with you about your outstanding debts." Caleb's face went carefully blank. "Come in." They sat at the table, the same table where Mara had served countless meals, where she'd listened to plans and problems and the slow grinding reality of frontier life. Now it became a courtroom. Brennan opened his case and pulled out papers. "Your note comes due today, Mr. Rourke, $500 plus accrued interest. Do you have the funds?" "Not yet, but I'm working on it." "Working on it isn't payment." Brennan's tone wasn't unkind, just factual. "The bank has been patient. We've extended your credit twice already, but we can't continue to carry debt that isn't being serviced." "I understand. I just need more time." "How much time?" 30 days. Maybe 60. Brennan exchanged a look with Mrs. Holbrook. "Mr. Rourke, in 60 days, it'll be spring, the planting season. If you can't pay now, you won't be able to pay then either. You'll just be deeper in the hole." "I have horses, breeding stock. I can sell them." "For how much?" Mrs. Holbrook asked, opening her ledger. "According to our assessment, your entire operation, land, buildings, livestock, is worth approximately $800, but that's if you can find a buyer. In this market, with land values falling, you'd be lucky to get half that." The numbers fell like stones. Caleb's hands clenched on the table. "So what are you saying?" "We're saying the bank is prepared to foreclose," Brennan said. "Take possession of the property, settle your debts, and release you from further obligation. You'd walk away with nothing, but you'd also owe nothing. Clean slate." "This ranch is my life. This ranch is a liability." Mrs. Holbrook's voice was sharp. "And the territorial government has investors interested in consolidating these small operations into larger, more profitable ventures. Your refusal to sell to Mr. Hail has created complications." There it was. The truth behind the visit. This wasn't about debt. It was about Hail wanting the land and using the bank to take it. Mara felt rage burn through her chest. She stepped forward before she could stop herself. "You're working for Hail," she said. Mrs. Holbrook looked at her like she was something unpleasant on the bottom of a shoe. "I work for the territory. Mr. Hale's investments simply align with our development goals. Development goals that involve stealing ranches from people who can't fight back. That's slander, Miss Whitlock. Mara Whitlock. And it's only slander if it's not true." Brennan held up a hand. "This isn't productive. Mr. Rourke, you have until end of business today to produce payment. If you can't, we'll begin foreclosure proceedings tomorrow morning." "That's not enough time," Caleb said. "It's all the time we can give you." They stood to leave, and Mara felt everything they'd fought for slipping away. But as Mrs. Holbrook packed up her ledger, something fell out, a loose paper that drifted to the floor. Mara picked it up before thinking. It was a land deed, not for Caleb's ranch, for the property adjacent to it, the one Hale had purchased 6 months ago, and scrawled in the margin, in handwriting Mara recognized from the letter she'd received, was a note: "Consolidate with Rourke property. Full acquisition by month's end. Proof. Proof that this was about taking the land, not collecting debt." Mara held up the paper. "You dropped this." Mrs. Holbrook's face went pale. "That's confidential." "It's evidence of fraud." Mara looked at Brennan. "She's using the bank to force a sale for Hale's benefit. That's illegal." "It's complicated," Brennan started. "It's corruption," Dutch said from the doorway. He'd been listening, and now he stepped forward, his weathered face hard. "And if you proceed with this foreclosure using fabricated pressure, I'll testify to that in any court that'll listen." "As will I," Carter added quietly. Brennan looked between them, clearly calculating. "Mrs. Holbrook, perhaps we should revisit—" "We're proceeding as planned," she snapped. "Mr. Rourke owes money. The bank has rights." "The bank has obligations," a new voice said from the door. Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was a man Mara had never seen before, tall, well-dressed, with the kind of presence that commanded attention. He walked into the room like he owned it, and set a leather folder on the table. I'm Samuel Carver, attorney out of Cheyenne. I represent a group of investors interested in the horse trade in this region. He opened the folder and pulled out papers. We've been reviewing Mr. Rourke's operation for the past month. His breeding program shows significant promise. We'd like to make an investment. Caleb stared at him. What kind of investment? $800. Immediate payment. In exchange for a 20% stake in your horse operation and first purchase rights on your breeding stock for the next 5 years. The room went silent. I don't understand, Caleb said. Carver smiled. You have something valuable, Mr. Rourke. Your horses, your methods, the reputation you're building. My clients want to be part of that. This investment pays off your debts, gives you operating capital, and establishes a partnership that benefits everyone. Who are your clients? That's confidential, but I can tell you they're not Mr. Hail. Brennan cleared his throat. If Mr. Rourke can provide payment, he can. Carver produced a bank draft and handed it to Brennan. $500 to settle the note, plus interest. The remaining $300 is Mr. Rourke's to use as needed. Brennan examined the draft, his expression shifting from skepticism to resignation. This settles the debt. Then we're done here, Carver said pleasantly. Mrs. Holbrook looked like she'd swallowed glass. This isn't over. Actually, it is. Unless you'd like me to file a complaint with the territorial governor about your relationship with Mr. Hail and your attempts to manipulate bank foreclosures for personal gain. Carver's smile never wavered. I have documentation, witnesses, and a very good relationship with the Attorney General. She left without another word, Brennan trailing behind her. When they were gone, Caleb looked at Carver with suspicion and wonder. Why are you doing this? Carver's smile turned genuine. Because someone asked me to. Someone who believes in what you're building here and didn't want to see it destroyed by a vulture like Hail. Who? Mara asked. But she already knew. Carver reached into his pocket and pulled out a letter. He handed it to Mara. It was from her mother. The mother who died when Mara was 12, who'd left nothing behind but memories and a small inheritance Mara had never been able to access because her father controlled it. But apparently before she died, Mara's mother had placed that money in a trust that matured when Mara turned 25, which had happened 3 months ago. The letter explained everything: the trust, the money, the instructions to find Mara and help her if she ever needed it. She'd had the means to save herself all along. She just hadn't known it. Mara looked up at Carver, tears burning her eyes. How much? The trust was worth $900. $800 went to saving the ranch. The remaining $100 is yours. My father's has no claim to it. Your mother made sure of that. Carver packed up his papers. I'll be in touch about the partnership details. For now, congratulations, Mr. Rourke. You just got your future back. He left, and the room erupted. Dutch was laughing, Carter was actually smiling, and Caleb stood in the middle of it all looking like he'd been struck by lightning. Mara just held the letter from her mother and cried. The celebration, if it could be called that, lasted about 10 minutes. Dutch opened a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving for something important. Carter actually shook Caleb's hand, and for a brief moment, the ranch house felt like a place where good things could happen. But the reality of what came next settled over them quickly, sobering as the winter air outside. Caleb stood by the window, staring out at the land that was still his, and Mara watched the tension refuse to leave his shoulders. You all right? She asked quietly. I just became a business partner with people I've never met, using money from a trust I didn't know existed. He turned to look at her. No, I'm not all right. I'm grateful, but I'm not all right. You'd rather have lost the ranch? I'd rather have saved it myself. There it was. The pride that had nearly destroyed him, still there, still sharp. Mara moved to stand beside him. My mother saved it. Not some stranger, not Hail. Someone who loved me enough to make sure I'd have something when I needed it most. She paused. And I chose to use it for this. For you. For us. That counts as saving it ourselves. Does it? Yes, because we're in this together now, whether you like it or not. Caleb's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. This time he did smile, and some of the weight seemed to lift from his face. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers, and they stood together looking out at the ranch that had almost slipped away. Dutch cleared his throat from across the room. Hate to interrupt, but we need to talk about Hail. The name landed like a stone in still water. Caleb turned. What about him? He's not going to take this well. Man like that doesn't lose gracefully. He had plans for this land, and we just destroyed them. Dutch set down his whiskey glass. He'll come back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he'll come back. Let him, Caleb said. The debt's paid. The ranch is secure. What can he do? Plenty. He's got connections at the territorial office. We saw that with Holbrook. He's got money. He's got patience. And now he's got a grudge. Dutch looked at Mara. Especially against you. You're the one who caught Holbrook with that document. You made him look foolish in front of witnesses. Mara had been trying not to think about that part. So what do? We watch our backs. We don't trust anyone connected to him. And we make damn sure our legal position is airtight. Dutch stood up. I'm going into town tomorrow. Going to have a conversation with the sheriff. Make sure he knows what Holbrook tried to pull. Get it on record. Good idea, Caleb said. I'll come with you. No. You stay here, work the horses, act like nothing happened. I'll handle the town. Dutch grabbed his coat. Carter, you're with me. Mara, Caleb, you two figure out what comes next, because saving the ranch was step 1. Making it thrive is step 2. He left with Carter, and suddenly Mara and Caleb were alone in the house that felt too quiet and too loud at the same time. Caleb moved to the stove and poured fresh coffee. He handed Mara a cup and leaned against the counter. We should talk about the partnership, he said. Carver said 20% stake. That means they own a piece of this operation now. They'll want reports, updates, maybe even input on how we run things. Can you live with that? Don't have much choice, but it changes things. This isn't just my ranch anymore. He paused. It's ours, yours and mine, and whoever these investors are. Does that bother you? I don't know yet. Ask me in 6 months. Caleb sipped his coffee. What about you? You just spent your inheritance saving a ranch in the middle of nowhere. Any regrets? Mara thought about it. Really thought about it. No, she said. This is where I want to be. This is what I want to fight for. The only thing I regret is that it took almost losing everything to figure that out. You could have left, gone back east with Lily, started over somewhere easier. Easier isn't always better. No, it's not. Caleb set down his cup and crossed to where she stood. I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Mara's pulse quickened. All right. I was going to marry Lily because I thought it was the right thing to do, the honorable thing. But every day she was here, I was thinking about you, wishing things were different, hating myself for wanting something I had no right to want. He took a breath. And when she left, my first thought wasn't relief that I didn't have to go through with the wedding. It was relief that maybe I had a chance with you. Caleb, let me finish. His hands found hers, rough palms against rough palms, both of them marked by work and survival. I don't have pretty words. I don't know how to make this sound like something out of a book, but I know that when you're not here, the ranch feels empty. And when you are here, it feels like home. That's all I've got. That's the truth. Mara felt her throat tighten. You want to know my truth? Yes. I fell in love with you somewhere between hauling water and learning to ride. I didn't mean to. I tried not to. But I'd watch you work with the horses, watch you make decisions that would break other men, watch you keep going even when everything was falling apart, and I couldn't help it. You became everything I didn't know I wanted. Caleb's eyes widened slightly. You love me. Apparently I'm that stupid, yes. He laughed, actually laughed, the sound rough and surprised and genuine. Then he pulled her close and kissed her. It wasn't graceful. Their noses bumped, their teeth clicked, and Mara made an undignified sound of surprise. But it was real and honest and theirs, and when they broke apart, both of them were smiling like idiots. We're terrible at this, Mara said. We'll get better with practice. Is that a promise? It's a guarantee. They kissed again, and this time it was smoother, deeper, the kind of kiss that felt like a beginning rather than an end. When they finally separated, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. Marry me. You already asked me that. I'm asking again. Properly this time. Not because I need help running the ranch, not because I made a commitment I have to keep. Because I love you, and I want to build a life with you. Mara pulled back to look at him. You love me? Did I not make that clear? You could stand to be more explicit. Fine. Mara Whitlock, I love you. You're stubborn and mouthy, and you work harder than anyone I've ever met. You don't back down from a fight, you don't quit when things get hard, and you make everything better just by being here. I love you. Will you marry me? It should have been an easy answer, should have been an immediate yes. But Mara had learned that nothing in life was that simple. Ask me again in 3 months, she said. Caleb blinked. What? I want to make sure we can actually stand living together, working together, being partners without killing each other. 3 months. If we still feel the same way, ask me again. You're serious? Completely. We've been through crisis after crisis. I want to know what we're like when things are normal, or as normal as they get out here. Caleb studied her face, then slowly nodded. 3 months. But I'm going to court you. Court me? Yes. Properly. The way I should have from the beginning. Mara felt warmth spread through her chest. I'd like that. Good. Because you're stuck with me either way. Might as well make it official eventually. They spent the rest of the day working side by side, falling into the rhythm they'd built over months without realizing it. Mara handled the house, Caleb worked with the horses, and by the time Dutch and Carter returned from town, the ranch felt settled in a way it hadn't in weeks. Dutch brought news that the sheriff had been very interested in Mrs. Holbrook's activities and was opening an investigation. Word around town was that Hale had left for Denver on urgent business, probably running before the scandal caught up with him. He'll be back, Dutch said, but not any time soon. We bought ourselves breathing room. Then we use it, Caleb said. We build this operation into something so strong that even Hale can't touch it. Over the following weeks, that's exactly what they did. The partnership with Carver's investors turned out to be a blessing. They provided capital for new equipment, connections to buyers Caleb had never been able to reach, and surprisingly little interference in how the ranch operated. Carver visited once a month, reviewed the books, offered advice when asked, and otherwise left them alone. The horses thrived. Caleb's breeding program produced foals that buyers fought over, and his reputation for quality stock spread across the territory. Money came in, not a fortune, but enough to cover expenses with something left over. Enough to feel like they might actually make it. Mara found her place in ways she'd never expected. She wasn't just managing the household anymore. She was working with the horses, handling negotiations with buyers, managing the books. Caleb had been right to call her a partner. She was essential to every part of the operation, and true to his word, Caleb courted her. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow. He took her riding in the evenings when the work was done. He talked to her about his plans, his fears, his dreams for the ranch. He listened when she talked about her mother, her childhood, the things she wanted for the future. It wasn't grand gestures or romantic speeches. It was daily choosing to see her, to value her, to build something together. And Mara fell deeper in love with every passing day. 2 months in, a letter arrived from Lily. She'd made it to California and found work teaching at a small school. She'd met someone, a widower with 2 children who needed a mother and a wife who could handle frontier life. She was getting married in the fall. I'm happy, she wrote. Maybe not in the way stories say you're supposed to be happy, but I'm building something real, something mine. I hope you and Caleb are doing the same. You deserve each other, Mara. You always did. Mara showed the letter to Caleb that evening. You miss her? He asked. Sometimes, but mostly I'm just glad she found her own path, even though that path led away from here. Especially because of that. She would have been miserable here. We all would have been. Mara folded the letter carefully. This way, everyone gets what they actually wanted instead of what they thought they were supposed to want. Caleb pulled her close. What do you want, Mara? This. You, the ranch, a life we build together. She looked up at him. Is that enough? It's everything. The 3-month mark came on a Tuesday. Mara woke to find Caleb already gone from the house. She went through her morning routine, building the fire, making coffee, starting breakfast, wondering if he'd forgotten or if he was waiting for the right moment. She was mixing biscuit dough when the door opened. Caleb stood there, covered in road dust, holding something wrapped in cloth. Where have you been? Mara asked. Town. Had to pick something up. He crossed to the table and unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a ring. It wasn't fancy, just a simple gold band with a small stone, probably not even a real gem. But it was beautiful in its simplicity, and Mara's breath caught when she saw it. Caleb picked it up and turned to her. "It's been 3 months." "It has. We haven't killed each other." "Not yet. We work well together. We fight well together. We've survived debt, deception, and Garrett Hail." He took her flower-covered hand in his. "Mara Whitlock, I love you. I've loved you since you first stood up to me in this kitchen and told me you could work. I want to spend the rest of my life working beside you, fighting beside you, building something that lasts. Will you marry me?" Mara looked at the ring, at Caleb, at the kitchen that had become hers, at the life they'd scraped together from nothing. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, and kissed her while the biscuit dough sat forgotten on the counter and the coffee boiled over on the stove, and neither of them cared. They were married a week later in town, with Dutch and Carter as witnesses, and a preacher who'd seen enough frontier weddings to keep the ceremony short. Mara wore a simple dress, not the silk and lace Lily had left behind, but something practical that she could work in afterward. Caleb wore his best shirt and looked more nervous than she'd ever seen him. When the preacher asked if she took this man, Mara didn't hesitate. "I do." And when Caleb said the same, his voice was steady and sure. They walked out of that church as husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word, and rode back to the ranch that was finally, completely theirs. The first year of marriage was hard, not because they didn't love each other, but because love didn't make the work easier, or the weather kinder, or the money problems disappear. They fought about how to handle the horses, about spending decisions, about whose turn it was to make dinner. They made up, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, always honestly. They learned each other's rhythms, learned when to push and when to give space, learned that partnership meant both of them bending, both of them growing, both of them choosing each other every single day. The ranch grew. They added more breeding stock, expanded the corrals, hired another hand to help with the increased workload. Carver's investors were pleased with the returns and increased their stake, which meant more capital for improvements. And through it all, Mara and Caleb built something that neither of them could have built alone. Garrett Hail never came back. The investigation into Mrs. Holbrook's activities uncovered enough corruption that she was removed from her position, and several of Hale's business deals in the territory fell apart. Word filtered back that he'd moved to Montana, where apparently the pickings were easier. Dutch said it best one evening over dinner. Some men can't handle losing to people they thought they'd already beaten. Hale's one of those men. He'll find someone else to prey on, but it won't be us. 2 years after the wedding, Mara discovered she was pregnant. She told Caleb on a spring evening, standing in the corral while he worked with a yearling colt. He'd been showing her how to read the horse's body language, talking through his process, when she interrupted him. "I'm going to have a baby." He froze. "What?" "I'm pregnant, about 3 months along, I think." The yearling took advantage of Caleb's distraction and pulled free of the lead rope, trotting off to the far side of the corral. Caleb didn't seem to notice. "You're sure?" he asked. "As sure as I can be without a doctor confirming it, but yes, I'm sure." Caleb closed the distance between them in 3 strides and pulled her into an embrace so tight she could barely breathe. "We're going to have a baby," he said against her hair. "We are. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to be a mother. We'll figure it out together." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with something that might have been tears. "Are you scared?" "Terrified. You?" "Absolutely." He kissed her forehead. "But we've done harder things than this." "Have we?" "We saved a dying ranch, survived your sister, beat Garrett Hail, and built a marriage that works. We can handle a baby." Mara laughed despite her nerves. "When you put it that way, it almost sounds easy. Nothing about our life is easy, but it's ours." Their daughter was born in November, delivered by a midwife from town, with Dutch and Carter nervously pacing outside and Caleb holding Mara's hand through the whole terrifying ordeal. They named her Claire, after Mara's mother. She was small and loud and perfect, and when Caleb held her for the first time, Mara saw something in his face that made her fall in love with him all over again. Wonder, pure, uncomplicated wonder. "She's so tiny," he whispered. "She'll grow." What if I break her? You won't. You're gentler than you think. Claire proved to be as stubborn as both her parents. She fought sleep, demanded attention, and made her presence known at all hours. But she also brought a kind of joy to the ranch that had been missing before, a sense of future, of legacy, of something being built that would outlast all of them. Dutch became a surrogate grandfather, teaching Claire to recognize horses by sound before she could walk. Carter whittled toys for her and pretended to be annoyed when she demanded he play with her, and Caleb and Mara learned to navigate parenthood the same way they'd learned everything else, together, imperfectly, with more love than skill. 5 years after Claire was born, they had a son. James, named after no one in particular, just because they liked the name. He was easier than his sister, quieter, more content to watch the world than demand it bend to his will. The ranch continued to thrive. Their horses were known across 3 territories, their breeding program studied by other ranchers, their reputation solid as granite. The partnership with Carver's investors evolved into friendship, and eventually Caleb bought them out entirely, using profits from years of careful growth. The ranch was theirs again. Completely. Just like it should have been from the start. Dutch retired eventually, too old for the hard work but too stubborn to leave. He moved into a small cabin Caleb built near the main house and spent his days telling stories to the children and offering advice nobody asked for. Carter stayed on, taking over as foreman, training new hands in the methods Caleb had developed. And Mara became the heart of everything. She managed the business side, handled correspondence with buyers, kept the books balanced. She raised the children, taught them to ride, to work, to value the land they'd been born to. She stood beside Caleb through good seasons and bad, through injuries and illnesses, and the slow, grinding wear of frontier life. She was no longer the unwanted daughter, the substitute bride, the woman who wasn't quite good enough. She was Mara Rourke, wife, mother, partner, builder of something that would last. 10 years after that desperate morning when she'd stepped off a wagon into a life she hadn't chosen, Mara stood on the porch of the ranch house and watched the sun set over land that was green and productive in theirs. Claire and James were in the yard, arguing over whose turn it was to feed the chickens. Caleb was in the corral with a new colt, his movements patient and sure. Dutch was dozing in a chair, hat pulled low over his eyes. Carter was checking fence in the south pasture. Everything was ordinary. Everything was perfect. Caleb finished with the colt and walked over to where Mara stood. He'd aged well, gray threaded through his dark hair now, lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But he was still strong, still solid, still hers. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything, nothing. How we got here. Luck, stubbornness, your mother's trust fund." Mara smiled. "All of that. And something else." "What?" "Choice. We chose this. We chose each other. We chose to fight when it would have been easier to quit. That's what made the difference." Caleb slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Any regrets?" Mara thought about the girl she'd been, scared and unwanted, standing in this same yard, believing she was worth less than the horses in the stable. She thought about all the times she could have left, all the times she should have given up, all the moments when staying seemed impossible. "Not a single one," she said, and she meant it. Years later, when Claire and James asked how their parents had met, Mara would tell them the truth. Not the sanitized version, not the romantic fairy tale, but the real story of 2 desperate people who'd been thrown together by accident and chosen to build something extraordinary. She'd tell them about being the wrong bride, about working herself to the bone to prove her worth, about watching the man she loved prepare to marry someone else. She'd tell them about Lily, about Hail, about nearly losing everything. And then she'd tell them about the choice to stay, to fight, to love someone imperfectly but completely, to build a life that was messy and hard and absolutely worth it. "The world tried to tell me I wasn't good enough," Mara would say, "that I was the mistake, the substitute, the one nobody wanted. But I proved them wrong. Not by being perfect, not by being beautiful or charming or any of the things people said mattered. I proved them wrong by working harder than anyone thought I could, by refusing to quit, by choosing myself when nobody else would." And her children would understand that the ranch they'd inherited, the horses, the land, the legacy, had been built on more than luck or money or circumstance. It had been built on the stubborn refusal of a woman who'd been told she wasn't enough to believe that lie. The ranch still stood 50 years later, run by Claire's children, then their children. The Rourke name became synonymous with quality horses, with honest dealing, with the kind of legacy that outlasted the people who built it, and every generation told the story of how it started. With a woman who wasn't chosen, who became worth choosing, who built something from nothing and proved that your beginning doesn't determine your end, your choices do. That was the lesson. That was the truth. And that was how Mara Whitlock, the unwanted daughter who became Mara Rourke, the woman who built an empire, taught everyone who came after her that worth isn't given. It's earned. It's chosen. It's fought for with a bloody hands and a stubborn heart. And once you claim it, nobody can take it away.